Hey, Mikey, I got a joke for you, and this one isn't especially funny, but it closely ties to the episode today. You ready?
As ready as I'll ever be.
So you, of course, know my friend, Wiley Pymore. Old Wiley told me a story recently about his wife, where she told him over breakfast that she dreamed he had given her a diamond ring. What do you think it means? She asked. Wiley smiled but said nothing and left for work. That evening, when he walked back through the door with a small gift-wrapped box, according to Wiley, she was so excited when she saw the box that it brought a tear to his eye. She opened the present with trembling hands and found inside a little book titled Dream Interpretation for Dummies. Hello, fellow untrained Freudian psych wannabes. It is I, the one and only Mr. Robin, your sleep-deprived co-host of Mr. Robin's Hood podcast, coming to you digitally from a cushy couch in Studio B, located at the compound just outside the Fargo, Oklahoma Metroplex. Get ready for another thrilling ride on our podcast. Let's be real, you know you can't resist. And joining me, as always, is my partner in production and hosting, known alternately as the founder, empath, spiritual advisor, and driving force behind the St. Charles Avenue Society of Weird Women for the Identification of Correct Firearms, known informally as SCAS WWICF.
What?
Sakazowit.
No one will remember that acronym, but thank you for trying.
None other than Mikel Mikey on the mic, Mauree Robinson.
Yeah.
Okay, enough of that.
Wow, what just happened?
I got it.
You are sleep deprived. I just witnessed it.
Okay. 1, 2. All right, we're back. God damn it. Give a warm welcome to our decidedly befuddled listeners, Mikey.
Yeah, they're even more befuddled than before. Greetings, decidedly befuddled, extremely befuddled listeners.
And co-host. And let's not forget our trio of troublemakers at the controls for today's chaotic adventure.
Oh, yeah, that was Fred. Cousin Fred did all that.
The infamous Repo Babe, Magdalene, the tow truck driver, the ex-flame and hairdresser turned hydrologist, Gigi.
Oh, Magdalene and Gigi should fight, throw down like the Waffle House brawl.
Oh, throw that in at some point. And Cousin Fred himself. Their presence here has added a whole new level of mental anguish and drama to my life. Together, they're constantly dreaming up new ways to make my life just a bit more miserable. Well, I guess everybody needs a hobby.
Not everybody can write award-winning parodies.
There you go.
You know?
Welcome to episode 27 of Mr. Robin's Hood podcast that we're calling Dreams as Creative Influence. And our guest today is Ingrid Wickelgren. Ingrid is an award-winning writer, freelance science journalist and editor based out of New Jersey with more than 30 years of experience writing and editing about the mind, brain, and all things biology and medicine. She specializes in long-form journalism, but also enjoys working on news, trends, profiles, and short features. Her work has appeared in Science, Health, Business Week, the New York Times, Science News, Scientific American, Scientific American Mind, Popular Science, Discover, and Spectrum. She has also penned more than 85 science stories for Current Science, a magazine for middle school students. Welcome, Ingrid.
Thank you.
You're certainly one of life's overachievers. Did I leave anything out of your bio that you'd like to update?
No, I mean I'm freelancing now, so some of the things you mentioned are sort of over the years,
Okay.
and my current writing is largely for Scientific American. I also write some for Quanta, which
Okay.
is it's an online magazine published by the Simons Foundation. And but I think you've covered most of it. I've written 3 books, but not any in a while. So, but maybe there'll be another one coming soon.
Oh, good. Good for you. So we ask you on here today to discuss an article you published in the May 15th, 2023 edition of Scientific American that was titled, "Here's How to Use Dreams for Creative Inspiration." And I wanted to start this by telling you what it was that made Mikey and I interested in having you on the podcast. We're both creatives. Mikey is a poet, art photographer, painter, writer, and most recently has begun writing song parodies. I've written a wide variety of things over the past 40 years or so, including articles, news stories, books, scientific reports, technical reports, screenplays. It goes on and on and on. Together, we've collaborated on a number of things, including one book and another that is in the final process of editing. So obviously, we have an interest in maintaining a high level of creativity. Interestingly, we had conversations about using dreams as creative influence before I stumbled upon your article in the Scientific American. I know, we were impressed with your research and writing. I guess I'm mostly interested in what it was that inspired you to write about finding creative inspiration in dreams. Please tell me you had a dream about it.
Well, first of all, I'd like to say that you guys are both for sure among life's overachievers.
Thank you.
I come from it, I think, from a little bit of a different angle. I'm just really interested in how the mind works and, where creativity comes from, the different elements of creativity. And I'm also really interested in sleep because sleep is so important. And there's a lot of really solid research on how, sleep's role in the mind. Sleep's important for lots of things, right? It's important for immune function and all kinds of things in your body. But one of the really interesting things that sleep is important for is your memory and other elements of cognition, such as dreaming. And I'm even kind of the point of view that we as a society, we think of sleep as downtime, right? Like people say things like, you can sleep when you're dead,
Yeah.
And
I've had a few bosses over the years.
That good old saying.
Yeah.
Right. So, I disagree. I'm sort of I'm in this culture too, right? So I get it. But I think that it's interesting to think about sleep as part of our lives more than we do, and dreams as part of our lives, and because there's a lot that goes on when you sleep, even though it's a different state of consciousness. And other cultures think of sleep as being more things that they talk about, that they share. They think of it as more equivalent to waking in terms of its importance. So
I always say,
I have a lot of things, but go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I always say I go to sleep and live a whole nother life.
Yeah. That's I think maybe not a common, I don't know, not a common way of viewing it, but I think it's
no, it's definitely not. But yeah, I know what you're saying. Like, I can definitely resonate with what you're talking about as far as it's very important. I get a lot of creative inspiration from my dreams. I've never like tried to, use that as that in just like the sense. It's just something that I've experienced all my life, is just having these dreams and then being just wild and using that.
Yeah. There's different phases of sleep, and the dreams are different in each phase, but the phase that most people are aware of is the REM sleep phase. And one of the things that people think about that, and maybe this is true for other phases too, but that it's sort of a space where we draw connections between things that we wouldn't connect during the day, because that's why they're so bizarre, these different things that happen that you wouldn't think like that during the day. We're much more constrained in our thoughts. So sometimes these things come up, and I don't know, maybe there's more things we're not aware of that dreams or sleep or, kind of bring to our minds, right? So maybe creative people are more productive or something in their sleep.
Yeah. Okay. In that article, you mentioned that sleep scientists for decades thought the link between dreaming and creative inspiration, if it existed, came during REM, the REM phase of the sleep cycle. But according to what you had written in there, the more recent research, and by that I mean, I think the earliest date I saw in that article was 2021, puts it closer to stage 1, or as it's also referred to, N1. Could you please discuss how that revelation came about?
So I think, for a long time, people have been wanting to connect dreams per se with creativity. I mean, as opposed to, it's very difficult to separate sleep from dreams, right? So there's a lot of talk about they want to connect dreams themselves, right? And I think it's actually been hard to connect that in REM sleep. And I think that one of the first kind of ideas that sort of N1, which is just that stage when you're just dozing off, right? You're not even like quite into sleep yet. And that, when for a long time, I mean, Salvador Dali would he'd have this like scheme for waking himself up in N1 so that he could capture the creative insights that he would get there. So he would hold, I think, a set of keys above a metal plate. And then when you doze off and you lose muscle control, your head bobs or whatever, his hand would go slack, the keys would drop into the plate, and he would wake himself up. And when he was awake, then he had just had whatever he was trying to think right before the dream, right, about something to do with his paintings. And then he would get some creative insight when he woke himself up, right, like that in the middle of it. And he could use that in his painting. And Thomas Edison used a similar type of trick for, his inventions. So to gain sort of creative insights that would help him invent things. And so there were these stories of famous creatives doing these things over time. And so I scientists eventually, 2021, I think, was the first real study of this, where researchers tried to actually study whether people were more creative if they sort of dreamed about something during that sleep onset phase.
That's really interesting to me. I'm also very interested in sleep. Like, I track my sleep cycles with my Apple Watch and everything. And Salvador Dali is one of my favorite painters, and I always look at his paintings and be like, if I could paint my dreams, this is what it would look like, And I think he was stated once saying, I don't do drugs, I am drugs. And I always made me think like, you have to be, and by drugs, I feel like creativity is kind of could be considered a bit of a drug in our bodies that some of us maybe have more of. I don't know. I mean, I'm just saying kind of hypothetically, you could connect it like that, where there are ways in such that you can gain some more, and that's in the sleep cycles or different parts of your physical being, putting yourself in certain situations to have those creative juices or thoughts start to come to fruition. You need that inspiration. I'm inspired by so many weird things, you just never know when it's going to hit you. And to try to find a way to be able to, I don't know about you, but sometimes I tell Robin, like, whenever I sit down to write, it's like I have nothing to write. But when I'm at work doing something, then I'm like, ooh, I could sit down and write a whole story right now. And I can't because I'm at work, But when I'm not at work and I'm trying to do it, it's harder.
It works.
Yeah. So anyhow.
Yeah. I mean, I think that all kinds of stimuli or different kinds of brain states, depending on, can drive creativity. And certainly I can imagine that a lot of the strange state that your mind would be in under certain, drugs could stimulate associations that you don't otherwise have. And I don't know, one of the things that I try to do is actually something that I learned from an interview with a scientist. He was a very young scientist, but he was very wise, which surprised me a little. And one of the things that he said is that he tries to expose himself to, this isn't sleep per se, it's creativity, but he tries to expose himself to things, all kinds of different scientific ideas. They may not be strictly in his field, because you just never know what you might learn that you could apply to what you're doing. And he had some really interesting examples of talks that he went to that was, they were like down the hall about somebody studying a completely different animal with it, and he got a really excellent idea for an experiment just from that talk. And so I think in terms of creativity, that I really think about that a lot, because a lot of times, at least for me, I tend to be pretty directed, if I have to research this, I should go to this thing, but, I should read this thing or go to this talk, or, there's a goal in mind, right? But sometimes the goal could just be, maybe I'll hear something cool,
Yeah. Yeah, this sounds like something that's interesting. I'll go to it, even though it doesn't maybe fit into what I'm trying to write about, but maybe get something from that'd spark a really great part of the piece you're working on. I get that so much.
Yeah.
And I think that's one thing about, researchers. I know they're trying to kind of research something, but hearing him being open-minded, because I think, having creativity in research is vital to getting a better outcome on your research, and that there's not a lot of research on the sleep. And in 2021, they're like, look how far we've come. Let's go back and visit this. There's so many things that have been researched, and they find something in 2021 that hasn't really been, let's go down that rabbit hole. I think it's great.
And when I found your that article you did for Scientific American was just unbelievably, fascinating, and it was a good read. But I kind of hesitated because I started thinking about stage N1. And for me, I've heard it referred to as a lot of times night terrors can take place in N1. And, it's that sort of light slumber where you're drifting off to sleep when all of a sudden you have these unbelievably scary dreams. Or is that just me?
I don't know.
Okay.
I thought nightmares were in REM.
Okay. I got to tell you something. I love it that you said that. I love that you said that because I've asked I mentioned that to my wife and she goes, "The hell are you talking about?" And I thought, well, maybe it's because I suffer from a mild form of PTSD, and I was thinking maybe that's the root of that.
Well, regardless of when they occur, I mean, dreams, although they can be extremely, helpful to us in terms of
Mhm.
creativity. I mean, there's other research that suggests dreams during REM sleep can actually bring emotional balance, bring, new ideas to the surface. I feel like there's also that's when it's working well, right? So if you have, there's a disorder called nightmare disorder, which is related to PTSD, but I think it's maybe a little more focused just on nightmares per se.
Ah,
And these are situations where the dreaming isn't working as it's supposed to, right? It's definitely not taming down emotions the way it's supposed to. And there are some therapies to try to help bring that back around. But yeah, it can be things. It's just important to realize that there are brain states where dreams are not helpful, you know.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah. So your article also asserted that researchers have been able to influence what a person will dream about. Could you kind of hit the highlights on that? What I guess
mhm.
the methodology to
Well, just correct me if I'm not answering correctly, but or what you
yeah,
had intended. So there was a little device that they used in this study,
the
um,
Dormio, right?
the
Yeah.
Dormio, yeah, and it could detect. It's worn on the wrist, and there are certain types of physiological parameters that it could use to figure out when people were entering N1.
Mhm.
And as they were entering it, it would tell them sort of remember to think of a tree. They just used tree as a test
See.
subject.
Mhm.
So that would be like, Dali deciding he was going to prime his brain right before falling asleep by thinking about his paintings, right? He didn't have anything
Right.
speak to him. That was the idea. So this is like telling people, okay, this is the thing you want to be creative about is a tree. And then it would then the device would wake them up like 1 to 5 minutes later and ask for a dream report. And then later on, they took three creativity tests.
Mhm.
So they wrote a story that included the word tree. They listed all kinds of creative alternate uses for a tree that they
Mhm.
could think of. These are kind of common creativity tests that
Right.
that researchers have used. And they wrote down the first verb that came to mind for a bunch of nouns that were related to trees. And basically the not everybody was prompted. They had a control group. They had two control groups. They had one that wasn't prompted by the word tree, and then they had some people that didn't sleep at all. And they found that the people who got the tree prompt had sort of the highest ratings, on these creativity tests, and the ones that slept and got the tree prompt. So that was the study. And it was pretty interesting, the way that they were able to do this. And yeah, so
Yeah, I was quite intrigued by that whole part of the article. One, I have a fascination with trees.
Yeah.
Um, already, like I've photographed them. I'm working on a poetry collection that's going to be called I Speak for the Trees. And it's basically all poetry I've written about trees and will include my photography of trees. I like to spend time in trees. I don't know if you've ever heard of I think it's a Japanese thing where they go tree bathing or earth bathing or something where they go out in a forest and just be among the trees. And it's very therapeutic. I've done that many times. I think it's fascinating. There's this tree out at Boiling Springs that's over 200 years old that I like to climb up in and chill. Done that a couple times. But anyhow, so it was interesting whenever people were talking about you wrote the Oak King, and that the trees went into shards. And I'm just thinking of all these things. I'm like, man, if I was in that research group and they prompted me about trees, and I'm already interested in trees, I could only imagine what I would come up with. I just thought that was so fascinating.
Yeah, you probably would have even more creative ideas about trees. It's interesting because, I suppose, they compared one group against another, but I wonder about, when you mention that, it makes me wonder about individual differences.
Right.
Because people have different, some people probably don't think about trees that much and other people do.
Right. Right. Yeah. I feel like that would make a difference. Like have another group of people that are tree lovers or tree huggers. I'll call myself that. I'll go hug a tree, literally. So that would be interesting to see the difference there. So maybe those researchers need to get on that. My phone number is, and I'm happy to be in a research project.
In the article, you quoted Dr. Robert Stickgold, cognitive neuroscientist and dream researcher at Harvard Med. I was wondering if you, and I was kind of interested in the approach to how they collected the data, organized the data, and who actually was receiving that data while that was going on.
They collected it. It was a Harvard group that collected this data. They were researchers, and it was, I think it was a bunch. Most of these, and I think it's true of this one as well, they recruit, college students. So
right.
I don't know if it was Harvard students or who, but because I know there were some collaborators at MIT as well. And, if you tell a bunch of college students that you're recruiting for a NAT study, you'll probably get a good number.
Yeah, I'd have been there.
And so I think, they probably collected that data on their own computers and analyzed it within their own team. I don't, a lot of these studies are funded by the government. That's why funding of the NIH is so important. I'm going to put that plug in there. But I don't believe that the government looks at the data unless there's some some other kind of study that's commissioned by them, right? Sometimes scientists become part of collaborative efforts of the government's, sponsoring. But I think this was I imagine the data was just in their lab.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't mean to make it sound like we're a bunch of paranoids out here on the Oklahoma plains.
Well, just kind of curious if there was, I kind of get where Mr. Romo is coming from. Just curious if there was some sort of reason outside of just maybe the, educational side of it that they were interested. This is a study they could do to learn, how to research and do a project. I mean, when I was in college, I have a mass communications degree. And we did kind of some community things where we were students, we weren't getting paid, but we did things that helped the community. They had a mural society over there, and we got different muralists that did murals there. We interviewed them, wrote little stories, and they used it on their website to promote. So it was like a community project that we did within the school, the college. So
no, it's not.
That's kind of how I was wondering. It was probably.
Yeah, I think universities, one of their goals is to kind of, I don't know, for lack of a better word, help the community, contribute to the community in certain ways that may be sort of more or less direct, rather than just being sort of this insular academic institution. A lot of them have talks and things that, and they usually have health centers that people go to and things like that. But I don't know about any more direct applications for this particular research. I think there could be some like more commercial type of, I could imagine gadgets, that people might want to buy that could do this kind of thing. But I don't know exactly whether there is anything specific for that would be commercialized, and I don't know about any government stuff beyond what I already mentioned.
Okay.
Yeah, I feel like
Fair
sometimes those projects give colleges a way to be able to give those students kind of real world situations. Like when you get this degree and you go out in the world and you apply it, this is kind of some of the stuff that you'll experience, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, in your article, you also discussed a web-based version of I can't talk. A web-based version of Dream incubation protocol that you could try at home. Could you talk about that just a little bit?
Yeah, I think it's a simple one. Basically, I think it allows you to, say what you want to dream about, and then it will then play a prompt for you for that as I guess you fall asleep, and then a wake up message so that it wakes you up at times. So it's sort of a more or less like it asks you to estimate how long it will take you to fall asleep and things like that. And then you can record your dream report. So it's sort of a modern day version of what Thomas Edison
Right.
Okay.
And Salvador Dali did. I don't know. I was thinking about busting out keys and a metal plate and the whole 9 yards.
Right. So you can, and also in this case, instead of just thinking about it, it will actually cue you with something like a tree. I mean, it's interesting because, I think the experiment probably needs to be done with other types of cues to make sure it's generalizable. There's something special about trees, but presumably there isn't anything special about trees. And you could just say, I want to, whatever, dream about a bicycle because my bicycle is broken. I want to know how to fix it. Or I don't know what people might want to, dream about.
Okay. So you referred to it as a web-based version of Dream incubation protocol. Is this an app?
I don't know if there's an
sorry,
app, but if you click on the link, it will actually just take you to a web page.
Okay.
And so that much I know. If you would call this web version an app or not, that term to me is somewhat ill-defined in my brain.
Yeah, I get that.
Okay. And I wanted to ask a question. I don't know if you can answer this or not, but based on what you learned from writing that article and the research that you did, for instance, I'm looking through here and you're talking about the participants then took creative tests and it goes into the whole thing about, everything was centered around trees. And my wife recently lost a friend of many decades, and she was wondering if this is something she could try at home to maybe influence her dreams and maybe, I guess, have some sort of connection with her friend again. Do you have any idea about that?
That's really sweet. I mean, I think it would probably influence if you do think about something right before going to sleep. It's often mirrored in that N1 stage. I mean, I think there's a lot of data to show that. I mean, creativity was a little trickier to study, but I think there's a lot of indication that you would do that in that stage. And, I don't know exactly what form that would look like, whether that would feel like greater connection or not. But it's very, very sweet idea.
It kind of makes me wonder about, I've been curious about lucid dreaming, and I don't know. I mean, it kind of makes me wonder, could you more easily lucid dream in N1 rather than REM? Or do you know anything about lucid dreaming as far as in any of the research you've done or your talks among the researchers about? I know that's kind of a different level, but it almost seems like, you're dreaming before. Lucid dreaming, you're kind of controlling that dream. You're almost trying to do that here in a sense, not fully, but you get where I'm coming from, if I'm making sense.
I think So, I'm a journalist. I'm not an expert, but
Right.
what I understand about lucid dreaming is that I believe it generally does occur in REM, and that there are ways to try to help people learn to dream, to have lucid dreams. That's a sort of dream that feels very real.
To me, when I dream, it feels real all the time. I mean, I physically feel physical pain in a dream, and it will wake me up, and I'll be like, oh my gosh, until I woke up, it was like I didn't know I was dreaming. So, and I was just kind of interesting. And if it's not something you can, if it's not something you can speak to, that's okay.
I think, I think lucid dreaming is sort of when you're basically conscious during your dream, so you can sort of like control it somehow.
Right.
And typically it happens during REM sleep. I don't know whether it ever happens during N1, but N1 is a very short period of sleep.
Mm-hmm.
So
right.
It might not be a very long dream.
Right.
If it were in N1.
Yeah. And you get toward the end of this article and you make a statement. Well, it's actually a quote from someone named Schooler, who says it's exciting because in principle, this is a technology that people could use themselves to foster their own creativity. And I think that really and truly kind of sums it all up.
Yeah. I mean, right. You can try to, it's not like one of these studies where you need some fancy machine that
right.
costs a fortune, like an MRI, right?
Right.
Right.
Fairly simple to do.
Yeah, so you can kind of do it. I'm curious, have you done it? Have you tried to explore this since you wrote the article? Because I'm going to try it. I'm inspired, but have you done that? I'm curious.
I don't know. I sort of forgot about it after a while. It's been a little while since I published it, and it's possible I might have tried it. One of the things that I do sometimes try is one of the things for me is I don't really want to wake up when I go to sleep. I just kind of want to go to sleep.
Right.
Not a big napper. So I don't know if I most days I probably couldn't nap.
So
and
you're
when
not
I want to
sure
go
that you'd be
sleep.
able to.
So, right. But that doesn't mean, I could try it, right? I could sleep deprive myself and then try it if I was really motivated to do so. There's different ways to foster creativity. One of the things that I sometimes do try to do is think about a problem before I go to sleep, because your brain does a lot of work in your sleep, and that's been known for a while. And creativity is often something that springs from thought, from memory, from lots of other things, right? There's different ways to be creative. There's different, what should I say, ingredients to being creative, right? And so it's not all just making weird connections you wouldn't make during the day. There's also, actually having a large body of knowledge about something is important for being creative. And so anyway, I like to sometimes try to think about something before I fall asleep that's like I haven't quite solved, and the whole, not just N1, but the whole sleep cycle, right? There's a lot of different elements that do different things, and I feel like that's something that can bring insight in the morning.
Yeah.
Sure.
Do you think about your different writing engagements too? Like if you're writing a piece, do you also think about maybe that piece before you go? Not just a problem, but
I think that would keep me awake.
You think? I was just curious.
Well, yeah, I do sometimes, and I think because sometimes I do view articles as sort of problems to be solved.
Okay, that's a way to look at it.
Yeah.
or because writing, to me, a lot of writing is understanding. Writing is sort of writing down what you know, and then as you write, you solve different things, but at the same time, you're actually understanding it better. You're putting it together in a more logical way.
Mhm.
And so it's just like a lot of different problems to be solved. And sometimes I'm stuck on one of those. And yeah, I might decide it's time to go to bed.
Yeah.
And then I'll wake up in the morning and maybe I'll have a better solution. And sometimes I do.
Great. Ingrid, thank you so much for joining us today. If you would like to know more about Ingrid and her work, Ingrid has an exceptional author website, one of the best I've seen, and believe me, I've looked at a lot of them. And you can find that at www.ingridwickelgren.com. And Ingrid, do you have anything you want to push
Add
or
any last
any
insights
last
or
thoughts?
anything you just want our listeners to know?
Maybe you want to promote something.
No, I've really enjoyed being on the show. It's was a lot of fun, and I guess one thing I'd like to add is just for people to, broadly speaking, that one of the reasons that I love what I do is that I do get to be creative, and I get to learn about things every day, and I get to ask questions, and I get
Mhm.
to be a critical thinker. And this may sound just sort of broad, but I would like to encourage listeners of all types to try it.
Great.
If they don't already. Many people do already. I'm not the only one for sure. But it's just something that, I would love for people to always, it's fun to learn and to think
It
about
is.
things and be creative. And
Hmm.
if you can use your sleep for that, then that's, an additional benefit.
Of course. Ingrid, thank you
Yes,
so
thanks,
very
Ingrid.
much. And I wish you luck in your future endeavors. And thanks for
Thank
coming
you.
on the podcast.
And we'll continue to follow your work and read more of your articles because we enjoy them.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
So, Mikey, this has been an informative and interesting episode of this podcast. Don't you agree?
Yes, I do.
That's another great podcast in the books and on the air. And if you have any questions for Mikey or myself about today's episode or any other damn thing, you can email us at mr.robin@mrrobinshood.com or Mikey@mrrobinshood.com. You can also find us on Facebook at Mr. Robins Hood Podcast. As always, you can also reach out to Mikey or me via Podophone at 580-827-0472. Maybe you just want to get something off your chest, or you're feeling some butt pain because of something we said during a podcast. Give us a call. You can leave a voicemail. Text us if you have a question, concern, complaint, compliment, suggestion, whatever. Just don't be a dick about it.
I have an idea.
What is it?
Okay. So, you know the song 8675309. I'm going to make a jingle with our phone number.
Oh,
I'm going to think of something.
that's really
Okay.
cool. What a great idea.
Yeah, it's just the idea. I will come back with the finished product at the next time we have to do an outro, and I will sing you the phone number
Excellent.
when you will never forget it.
I'm certain of that. As always, you can stream or download episodes of Mr. Robins Hood Podcast wherever you usually find that sort of nonsense. We're on Spotify, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, the Podbean app, Apple Podcast, and Podchaser. You can also stream them directly from our Podbean website at mrrobinshoodpodcast.podbean.com for free. And I haven't been talking about our YouTube channel, but we have one. You can find us by searching for Mr. Robins Hood Podcast on the YouTube site. That'll play big when we start doing video podcasts in the coming new year. But for now, as always, we'll be signing off by reminding you to stay hungry,
stay foolish,
and
most importantly, dream weird shit. Bye for now. And I already do that all the time. Dream weird shit. Last one.